Hello, hello, honeys. Welcome to the Beesness. We once again have your buzz, this time for the week of April 13th through 19th. Things at the Historical Society as well as on the rugby scene continue to go well for me, in case you were wondering. So let's go ahead and dive into today's stories. An update in the legal battle over a Giacometti sculpture, David Geffen has now hit crypto collector Justin Sun with a countersuit. Refer back to earlier Beesnesses for the full background. But in short, billionaire collector and music mogul David Geffen has unequivocally refused to cave to Justin Sun's demands for the return of an Alberto Giacometti sculpture that the latter claims was stolen from his collection by an employee and sold as part of an elaborate fraud. Our new information is this: Geffen hit Sun with a 100-page countersuit last Wednesday, attacking his core argument that Sydney Xiong was not involved with his art collection, though she remained listed as the director of Sun's art organization, APE NFT, on its website even after Sun filed the first lawsuit in this case in February. Geffen's suit also alleges that Sun's story is full of inconsistencies, pointing out that Sun's various legal representatives were allegedly given conflicting information on the case. He went on to allege that Sun has already proven himself capable of dishonest business, as Sun has been sued by numerous former employees who claim he forced them to engage in, quote, unethical and/or illegal business activities, end quote. Plus, in March of 2003, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged him and Tron, the blockchain he founded, with fraud, among other security violations. As of February, the case there is still seeking a resolution. Still, one lawyer for Sun, William Charon, said that Geffen is taking a serious and, quote, highly unwise, unquote, risk in staking his case on the idea that Xiong always spoke for Sun and thus on her innocence, even though she has already confessed to the theft, been arrested in China, and remains in detention there today. We additionally learned that the death of artist Sarah Cunningham was ruled accidental. A formal inquest into the 31-year-old London-based artist's death back in November of 2024 involved no foul play. Cunningham had gone missing in the early hours of November 2nd in Camden, and her body was later found on the tracks at Chalk Farm Underground Station. This inquest determined that Cunningham had intentionally jumped down onto the northbound train track and walked into the tunnel where a train hit her, though they do not believe that she intended to take her own life. Last week also saw RISD students protesting the relocation of a pro-Palestine art exhibition. Around 70 Rhode Island School of Design students staged the demonstration outside the school's administrative offices on Tuesday, aiming to protest the administration's decision to relocate an art exhibition focused on anti-imperialism and Palestinian liberation to a private building requiring ID swipes to enter. The RISD student group, Students for Justice in Palestine, has demanded that the exhibition, titled To Every Orange Tree, be reinstated in its original location in Car House Cafe, a student-run space on campus. It's also calling on the administration to prohibit Immigration and Customs Enforcement from campus and to safeguard community members' records and legal statuses. It was unclear as of Saturday whether RISD President Crystal Williams would meet with students to discuss a rejected proposal that would see the end of the school's ties with any companies connected to Israel and/or to change the administration's minds about this exhibition's location. A second protest occurred last week as well at the Guggenheim Museum by workers protesting the layoffs. On April 16th, over 50 cultural workers and supporters protested the museum's decision to cut 20 staffers without notice in late February as guests filed into a solo exhibition opening. That one was by Rashid Johnson and is being very well received, by the way. But the protest itself featured chants of things like, quote, Guggenheim's cheap, quote, New York is a union town, and, quote, up with the union, down with the layoffs, end quote. Signs like, quote, stop the Department of Guggenheim efficiency, end quote, were also featured. At the time of the layoff announcement, the museum blamed extended post-pandemic financial constraints, while the union's chapter president, Olga Budastova, told Hyperallergic that the impacted staff were cut immediately and without notice. 14 of the affected workers are represented by Local 2110 United Auto Workers, and this was the museum's third round of layoffs in 5 years, alongside raised ticket prices, hiring freezes, and reduced operating expenses. What caught our attention about this story is not only the protest element, but the fact that they were joined by workers from the New Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, the Hispanic Society, the Brooklyn Museum, Dia Art Foundation, and the American Folk Art Museum. museum. A truly remarkable amount of solidarity there. Furthermore, several attendees who spoke to Hyperallergic said they were not previously aware of the museum layoffs, only learning about the staff cuts from the crowd and the leaflet handouts made by the protesters. One such interviewee said, quote, "On top of being wrongfully discharged, they've also not been able to have their voices heard, and that's when people become suspicious," end quote. We learned about a number of upcoming notable sales. First, Sotheby's was consigned to sell over 40 works by Roy Lichtenstein with a total estimate of $35 million US. The pieces come from the private collection of the artist's family and span 4 decades as well as several mediums. They will form part of the upcoming May auctions. The most significant pieces include the painting Reflections Art from 1988 with an estimated worth of 4 to 6 million US, as well as the wood sculpture Woman, Sunlight Moonlight from 1996 and with the same estimated worth. The collection also features an edition of Lichtenstein's 1993 painted pewter and patinated bronze sculpture Bonsai Tree. According to ArtNet's price database, that would only be its second appearance ever at auction. Concerns raised about potentially flooding the market were waved off by the House's vice chairman David Gelperin, who said the decision was driven by the strong results and other auction data from a Lichtenstein sale in November. Quote, "Lichtenstein has become an artist whose work really carries universal renown and appeal, like Picasso, like Warhol, like Alexander Calder, artists who are perhaps the most stable of the art market," end quote. And finally, we learned that a 700-year-old scroll by a renowned calligrapher fetched over 32 million US in a record-breaking bidding battle at Sotheby's this week. The work in question was created by 14th century calligrapher Rao Jai. Pre-modern Chinese calligraphy scholar and Indiana University assistant professor Yan Wai-Tian explains that Rao lived and worked amid the rocky transition between the Yuan and Ming dynasties. The artist's style bridges these gaps a bit, combining the classical style associated with the 4th century calligraphy sage father-son duo known as the two Wangs with the energetic speed defining the wild cursive tradition of the Tang dynasty. More importantly, the object features more than 100 added postscripts, which increase the price as they offer individual assessments of a given work and/or information about the maker, seller, or buyer, which can add to its overall cultural significance. One postscript is by the Qianlong Emperor of the Qing dynasty with his personal catalog documentation notes, so you can imagine how valuable that one is. The hand scroll got more than 200 offers at Sotheby's Hong Kong last Thursday before the hammer went down in a record-breaking 95-minute bidding battle. The piece considerably surpassed its pre-sale estimates, projecting it to go for about 1.29 million US or 20 million Hong Kong dollars. Having sold now for over 32 million US, though, it is the most valuable piece of Chinese calligraphy that the auction house has ever sold. We also learned last week that a Russian photographer was disinvited from the World Press photo ceremony. The voices of Georgian journalists arguing against the Dutch nonprofit organization World Press Photo's selection for Photo of the Year were the loudest. They accused the organization of reinforcing Russian propaganda under the logic that Mikhail Tereshchenko, as a staffer for a Russian state-backed media outlet called TASS, should not have received the award for his photos of last year's historic Sibylle protests. The WPP, as we will call them, has recognized some of the most impactful and ubiquitous images of war/tragedy since its first awards in 1955, including the unforgettable 1972 image of 9-year-old Van Tush Kim Phukas fleeing a napalm attack taken by Nick Ut for Associated Press. Last month, Tereshchenko won the organization's prestigious annual regional award for a series of photos capturing anti-government protests in the Georgian capital by demonstrators who took to the streets early last November to protest the pro-Russia ruling party's obstruction of Georgia's efforts to join the EU and its widely disputed election results, especially as Georgia has been an independent state since the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Georgian journalist Alexandre Kashalashvili, who was detained and severely beaten by riot police during an anti-government protest, wrote in a March 29th social media post about the matter, quote, "The demonstrators in the award-winning photographs are people fighting back against the very same forces that TASS protects and serves. This decision undermines independent media and amplifies propaganda and allows false narratives to gain broader acceptance," end quote. The WPP then announced announced that due to, quote, the increased tensions on the European continent, end quote, Tereshchenko would be excluded from the April 18th awards event. Tereshchenko probably did not help his own case with the WPP by reportedly referring to Russia's 2022 violent siege and ongoing occupation of the city of Mariupol as an act of, quote, liberation, end quote, in an interview last month, counter to the organization's stated viewpoint. World Press Photo did not rescind the photographer's award, however, meaning his work will still be included in a year-long touring exhibition across Europe, North America, and South America. Defending itself, the WPP said that entries are judged anonymously. Jurors themselves said the series, quote, featured an important global story, but said that it will look to improve its rules for entries from state-controlled agencies and consult photographers working under, quote, oppressive regimes, end quote, going forward. At the same time, TASS director Andrei Kondrashov said that the rescinded invitation signaled broader European Russophobia. Also last week, the Ukraine culture minister accused Russia of selling stolen pieces of Ukrainian cultural property on the black market. According to the minister, Russia has stolen more than 1.7 million pieces of Ukrainian cultural heritage since its full-scale invasion began. The new claims form in addition to other existing accusations that Russia is deliberately targeting Ukrainian heritage. Doing so would violate the 1954 Hague Convention, aka international war crime laws. Ukrainian officials have also accused Russia of openly exhibiting the looted art in museums held in Russian territory. For example, the Kherson Art Museum identified 100 works allegedly looted from its collection by Russian forces in a quote-unquote propaganda video shot in Crimea's Central Museum of Tavrida in April of 2024, which reportedly aired on Russian TV in September of 2023. Importantly, UNESCO has verified damage to 485 cultural properties and has, quote, reliably documented more than 1,200 damaged heritage sites and cultural infrastructures, end quote, across Ukraine as of April 15th. The Ukrainian minister spoke to several other various EU cultural ministers during an informal meeting in Warsaw on April 7th and 8th about the problem of looting and the black market sale of Ukrainian artworks and artifacts. Though he thanked his colleagues for their aid against these threats, he stressed that more efforts are needed to end the trafficking scheme. It also remains unclear how the U.S.'s attempts to negotiate a peace settlement without Ukraine could affect the country's missing art and whether it's returned at all. The BBC came under scrutiny last week for restoring a statue by Eric Gill despite public calls for its removal due to the artist's history of abuse. As this story and our next one involve sexual abuse of some kind, I'm going to give y'all a trigger warning. If you don't want to hear about it, don't listen to the next 3 minutes. A bit more on the work and artist in question. It is titled Ariel and Prospero from 1932 and was created by the British sculptor and typeface designer Eric Gill, who revealed in his diaries, discovered by cultural historian Fiona McCarthy nearly 5 decades after his death, that he sexually abused his daughters. The controversial statue was revealed outside BBC London headquarters after repair work on Wednesday, April 9th, though it was put behind a transparent protective screen following 2 incidents of vandalization that have happened in the past involving a hammer. Both those incidents involved the same individual, David Chick, who pled not guilty to the offenses last month and until his May 2026 trial has been ordered by a judge to not go within 100 meters or about 328 feet of the statue. The official statement on the matter is, quote, the BBC in no way condones Gill's abusive behavior, but it draws a line between the actions of Gill and the status of these artworks, end quote. They went on to note the statue is protected by a grade 2 listing, meaning it's classified as a historical structure with unique architectural, cultural value, and thus it has certain legal protections. We will see whether public opinion wins out in the end. We also learned new details have emerged in the child rape investigation surrounding French artist Claude Lévesque. The French daily publication Liberation published an in-depth report on April 16th into the allegations against the decorated 72-year-old artist who represented his nation at the 2009 Venice Biennale. The allegations came from several men aged 35 through 60 who accuse him of raping them while they were children, following a first complaint that was made in 2019. A more recent claim was made within France's statute of limitations in November of last year. Lévesque has admitted to having sexual relations with at least some of the accusers, but he has reportedly claimed that everything was consensual and that they were 15, aka of legal age, at the time. Lévesque architect's neon artworks have since been pulled from exhibition, and his gallery has suspended representation, so it's not looking good. On the other hand, we heard about 2 climate protesters who were pardoned after gluing their hands to Raphael's Sistine Madonna altar painting. They did so in a protest that took place in August 2022 at the Dresden Old Masters Picture Gallery. The 2 were members of the German environmental group Letzte Generation, or Last Generation. They entered the gallery and attached one hand apiece to the frame of the world-famous artwork. The piece itself was not damaged by this, but traces of superglue left on the frame supposedly cost 2,300 euros in harm to its protective finish. Shortly thereafter, the Dresden State Art Collections, or SKD, if you're going off its German name, filed a complaint for, quote, damage to property that is harmful to the community, end quote, thereby initiating civil proceedings for the damages with the city's public prosecutor's office. They also banned the 2 protesters from all 15 SKD institutions. Last year, the Dresden Regional Court finally sentenced the protesters each to a fine of 300 euros for joint property damage after they had appealed penalty orders of 1,500 euro, then 600 euro charges by the Dresden District Court. This was because, according to a report by German news agency Deutsche Presseagentur, or DPA, the regional court considered the ongoing restitution process as a mitigated factor. What they mean by ongoing restitution process is that both protesters have paid more than 2,000 euros apiece in damages to the Dresden State Art Collections since this incident. So finally, a light in the end of their punishment tunnel. And continuing our rundown of arrests and other crimes, dealer Leslie Howard Roberts was arrested again on charges of selling fake artworks last week. NBC News reports the 62-year-old owner of Miami Fine Art Gallery in Coconut Grove was arrested and charged in federal court in a conspiracy to sell fake Andy Warhol artworks using forged invoices and authentications. This is not the first time for Roberts, however. He served time a decade ago for selling fake Peter Max artworks, and according to New York Times, since 1986 has been accused of selling forged works or of failing to deliver purchased art in no fewer than 8 lawsuits. He also has served 2 years in federal prison on art fraud charges and has filed for bankruptcy twice to date. Also implicated was Carlos Miguel Rodriguez Melendez. Both were charged with wire fraud and money laundering and were arrested during last week's FBI raid of the property. The federal indictment says that Roberts told buyers the artworks came from the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, and while he provided fake identification numbers and stamps from the institution, Melendez allegedly helped authenticate them by posing as a New York auction house employee. Roberts' money laundering charge is mostly related to the accusation that he transferred some of the sales proceeds, approximately $240,000, from the gallery account to his personal bank account. We also were excited to hear about a new exhibit at the National Archaeological Museum in Naples featuring 600 previously missing artifacts. The museum, located in southern Italy, has for more than 50 years preserved artifacts that have been seized or confiscated by the Carabinieri, a police unit focused on the protection of Italy's cultural heritage. It has accrued over 15,000 items in this effort. Per the AP, strict laws govern the ownership of archaeological artifacts in Italy, and though looting is a centuries-old problem, today's criminals have turned to advanced technologies like sonar drones and underwater metal detectors to nab treasure from shipwrecks and other ancient sites beneath the Mediterranean Sea as well as on land, making the Carabinieri's job that much harder. 600 of these objects are now featured in the exhibit Rediscovered Treasures, Stories of Crimes and Stolen Finds. They include a bit of everything: ceramics, coins, sculptures, pottery, furnishing, weapons, armor, and their stories of illegal exchange. The show's press statement emphasizes that this was a collaboration, quote, between institutions, law enforcement, the academic world, and museums, capable of combining protection and enhancement, end quote, that addresses the, quote, often complex dynamics that fuel the illicit trafficking of cultural goods, end quote, all while focusing on, quote, the gravity of crimes that profoundly threaten the integrity of the national cultural heritage, affecting historical memory and collective identity, end quote. One of our more ironic headlines ever, a London graffiti show was shut down last week after a vandalism controversy involving, you guessed it, graffiti. The show was organized by Arts Arcade and the London magazine Big Issue at London's Piccadilly Circus, and it was abruptly shut down last Thursday after a tag reading, quote, F, you know the rest, the king, ending," end quote, was found scrawled on the walls of the venue and nearby buildings. The show was titled Long Dark Tunnel and had been open for only 3 weeks, presenting a sort of gallery takeover by notable names in the scene, including 10-Foot, Tox, and Fume. Arts Arcade wrote in an Instagram post announcing the shutdown, quote, "The criminal damage we've experienced is totally unacceptable and it is not a matter we take lightly," end quote, though there's no indication that the featured artists or show participants were responsible for the damage. All the same, the incident allegedly led the estate to put pressure on the organizers to deal with the damage themselves, hence the shutdown. The natural question is, why would graffiti shut down a graffiti show? The answer for why it's a problem is that property is owned by the Crown Estate, also known as the Monarch's £15.5 billion property portfolio. The Crown Estate declined to comment in light of the, quote, "ongoing police investigation," end quote, but the Big Issue Group was willing to communicate that this is an unfortunate loss for them. Quote, "We threw everything at this show with nothing but good generative intention. People have come from all over the country in their hundreds. We raised hundreds of thousands for homeless people," end quote. Some exciting news for architecture nerds worldwide. Antoni Gaudí could be made a saint after becoming one step closer before Pope Francis's unfortunate passing on Easter Monday. Pope Francis had officially initiated the sainthood process for the late Catalan architect by giving the green light to the Vatican's dicastery for the causes of saints to issue an April 14th decree that recognized the architect's quote-unquote heroic virtues. Gaudí was known as God's architect for his piety. He was greatly influenced by Christianity and nature and often infused motifs of both in his designs for the Sagrada Familia Basilica as well as several other internationally renowned sites of his across especially Barcelona. Gaudí is celebrated for his work in Catalan modernisme and for generally promoting Catalan identity, artistry, and culture through his architectural project. This decree is an important milestone in the confirmation process that designates him and other dead figures with ties to the church as quote-unquote venerable. Venerable means that the Vatican recognizes he's achieved some level of Catholic sanctity, but they haven't yet canonized him fully. This is the second of 3 steps on the path to sainthood. Gaudí achieved the first step in 2003 by achieving beatification, or a local veneration level, which opened his cause for canonization with the Vatican. The timing is also fascinating. The decree outlining Gaudí's new venerable status also comes just about a year in advance of the centenary of the artist's untimely death in a 1926 tram accident. We also heard that Nan Goldin is selling prints to benefit a Gaza animal hospital. The online initiative through the fundraising organization Pictures for Purpose supports the resource-strapped Sulala Animal Rescue, which has been operating across several displacement sites with hundreds of animals in their care. The organization also distributes food, water, and medicine to the displaced people and families who brought their pets with them, working to combat animal cruelty and neglect in these times of disarray and deprivation. The 3 signed prints available cost between 185 to 230 euros or 210 to 262 US dollars. All of them are taken during the artist's travels through London, Paris, and Mexico City. After tax, production, and digital payment deductions, the remaining 65% goes to the animal rescue. Go check that out if you feel so inclined. And last, honeys, we heard that a rare watercolor by Wuthering Heights author Emily Bronte will go on public display for the first time. The painting, known as The North Wind of 1842, recently sold at auction for $42,000 US to the Bronte Parsonage Museum, formerly the Bronte family home, in Haworth, Yorkshire. Anne Dinsdale, the principal curator at the museum, says, quote, "Emily is probably the most enigmatic of the Brontes. It's extremely rare to see anything associated with her coming on the market, making this painting of great importance," end quote. Following restoration work, the painting will go on public view at the site where the Bronte sisters created some of 19th century England's greatest literary works. And that is our buzz for the day. I know it was a bit of a long one, but I really had a hard time narrowing down some of these headlines, so I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did. Especially with the weather warming up, don't forget to hydrate or dihydrate and take care. We will talk again soon with a little something headed your way later this week. This podcast is produced, created, hosted, formerly edited, and fact-checked by master's degree holder Celia Bugno. Chris Meinhold is responsible for our editing, mixing, and our intro and outro music. Special thanks to him for that. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, subscribe, share, comment, so on all your favorite listening as well as social media channels.